Hi, welcome back everyone. Welcome Peter and Mihai. We have another episode from this playlist of Reigniting the Fragments of the Fourth Way. We are exploring the teachings of the Fourth Way in conjunction with the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, as well as, I'm a psychotherapist, so from the point of view of healing and trauma-informed. And there's a here playlist with over 60 episodes that if you are interested in what we are talking here, we recommend you go from the beginning. And this talk today, Peter, we already started before recording it, and maybe you can share some of this about maybe some misunderstanding that may be circulating these days in YouTube spirituality, or the so-called YouTube Advaita Vedanta non-duality or New Advaita. Some misunderstanding around awareness and what's the goal of the path or the end of the path. And then also we are planning to explore this fourth way teaching around the whole purpose of awakening, becoming more conscious. The purpose and the way to go about it is by freeing oneself from certain mechanical laws we are under, escaping from some of these heavy, dense, suffering-inducing, freedom-limiting conditions, through putting ourselves under other laws. And so looking at the path from this perspective, and maybe I'll let you launch us here.
This is one of the underlying principles of the fourth way as Gurdjieff presented it, which is that there are different worlds in what he described as the ray of creation. So when you go from an all-encompassing, all-unified, all-conscious source of the universe, which he characterized as world one, just for mathematical purposes to understand it, and then that descends. Now world one becomes more dense, and the vibration of it, you could say, slows down. It's a slower, denser world than world one. And it's called World 3, and this continues World 6, World 12, World 24, World 48, and World 96. There are 7 worlds. They are like dimensions. And as you go down that list I just described, everything becomes slower and more dense. And when you get down to the bottom, you get down to where we are, near the bottom. And so he presented the idea that we are under these laws, and what he really meant is consciousness. He used the term consciousness, of course, versus awareness, but we can say it's the same thing. We're referring to the same thing. But he said that it's consciousness that is under these laws. Now, the human body is under certain laws here on Earth. We are subject to gravity. We have to drink water. We have to breathe air. You could go so far as to say we need to earn money and have jobs and put food on the table and this kind of thing. We're under the physical law of illnesses. We can get sick and our body has to heal. We can't prevent that necessarily, and all of this. So there are many, many things, and you can't list all these laws. You can't come up with a list. Here they all are. But in general, what he said is each world, I know this is getting a little more complex, but each world is subject to all the worlds above it, all the laws in the worlds above it. And then it is subject to 3 laws specific to it, to each world. So here we are on planet Earth in human form. There are 3 laws that we are particularly subject to, that the planets are not subject to, the sun is not subject to, the galaxy and so on. But we human beings on Earth are. What are these laws? And so what does it mean to be under laws in the way that Gurdjieff spoke about it? What does it mean to escape? What actually escapes? Where does it escape to? What happens to it if it escapes from these lower laws, then what? These are all interesting questions for exploration. And we'll try to touch on some of those. And I would say that in my experience and in my understanding, these three laws, the three most principal laws that consciousness is under, are one is what the fourth way calls identification, which you can think of as it's this constant pull like a magnet. It's like psychological gravity. And it's pulling, luring, tempting awareness out of the recognition of itself and into whatever it is aware of. As soon as we become conscious of something, part of our awareness starts to go out of itself. And what happens is, as it goes out, it usually sort of it follows itself out toward whatever it is observing or aware of. And in the case of humans, this is what the Eastern traditions have always called attachment. We get tempted, we then attach, and then we become identified, meaning we form a sense of identity in relation to, it's now me looking at the flower. Before there was just awareness, and this awareness could cognize itself inside here, inside this body mind. And then it sees something and it starts to be pulled out. And this is happening every few seconds. Until you start observing yourself, you don't realize the full extent to which you are identified almost all the time in some degree. So that's one law. What does this mean to be under this law for consciousness? And what would it mean for it to escape this law? And another primary law is what is called imagination. And this is simply the mind wandering by itself with uncontrolled attention. And by the way, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about and will be talking about has to do with attention also. Escaping from these laws is directly connected to first gaining control, attention gaining control of itself. Whereas normally it's not in control of itself. And then yielding itself or transforming itself back into awareness, which is its source, its origin, attention. If you think about that, what is attention? Usually we think of attention in terms of what our attention is on. We rarely think about where does attention come from? And it comes from awareness. It is a form of awareness in a lower form. It is awareness in a lower form, you could say. So this imagination is huge. We're daydreaming. We're thinking about the past. We're thinking about the future. This feels so real to us. We kind of swim in this mental soup all day of past, future, worry, anticipation, regret, fixing problems, anticipating problems, worrying or hoping, wishing, believe. This is also imagination. And the mind is turning with this soup. It's like just stirring a pot of soup all the time. Mm-hmm. And awareness is right in there. Keeps getting lost. And it's rare that someone pulls their awareness up out of this soup and realizes they're here, they're present, meaning the awareness is present, cognizant of being aware. So these two, identification and imagination, these are very big laws, and they have a huge sway over us nearly all the time when we don't know about them and when we're not observing ourselves and when we're not trying to, as the fourth way says, remember ourselves. Be aware, be consciously aware, be present right here. Nope. It's not, you see, it seems easy, but it's not easy to let go completely of a future, let go completely of the past. All past problems, issues, concerns, they're done. Drop them. Don't attach to them. Don't identify with them. Future, worries, anticipations, hopes, expectations, let them go. They're not here. They're just in our imagination. Even if they have a basis in reality, it's still expectation, which is imagination. How to float right here, just keep being here. To the point that there's not even a now, there's not even a present. There's just presence. You are this presence. And you don't even have to be present to anything. Presence can just be present to itself, as itself. but we're always latching onto this future past. This is imagination and identification. Has a constant hold over almost all human beings all the time. And then the third law, this is again from my understanding and my experience, is this whole conglomeration of negative emotions. And they're really a combination of imagination and identification. This is when these identification collapses down in and it allows all this imagination. Because when we're in imagination, we're identified with it, basically. If we can start to see this imagination, not be identified with it so much, it will start to dissipate. Now we're releasing this imagination and we're back to trying to release identification also, trying to untangle our awareness, trying to untangle itself from this knot of identification. But negative emotions is a combination of both. And it's an even lower, denser, slower trap, prison, that we are in prison, as Gurdjieff said, and this is what we're trying to escape from. Consciousness is trying to escape from the quote unquote prison of negative emotions, imagination, and identification. And I will just add to this that, and it's partly why I was interested in us having this talk, Mihai, is that identification, the idea is that we have these centers, we are these human beings, and we have centers. We have an emotional center, an intellectual center, and an instinctive moving center. Now, we really have the instinctive moving center can be thought of as two. Gurdjieff initially introduced them as one combined and then broke them apart later. But for the purposes of these laws, basically, when we talk about identification, this is really a law that relates to our emotional center. The emotional center is the center in us. It operates the fastest. And as soon as identification starts to happen, as soon as awareness starts to drop down into this emotional center, our emotional center starts to get agitated. It gets agitated. It starts to vibrate with an intensity that it can't quite handle. It doesn't know how to accommodate this higher energy coming from higher worlds into this world of our emotional center, this dimension, which is said to be operating according to the same laws as the planetary world. I know that's theoretical. This world's 24 in the fourth way. But our emotional center starts to get agitated, and awareness can't retain awareness of itself now in this condition. And so when we're to escape from identification is really for awareness to begin to escape from the hold that the emotional center has over it. And the same thing is true of the intellectual center and imagination. Imagination is really a problem, you could say, of the intellectual center. Now, all the centers contribute to imagination. I can start going into imagination about my health or my bank account, which are both instinctive. I can start to go into imagination about a relationship or someone I'm attracted to, or a difficult situation I encountered with someone where there was an exchange of words and I'm holding a grudge and but all of it gets put into the intellectual center like a mixer, and that's where it gets churned. And that's where why did I say that? I know next time I see it, I'm going to say this. I hope that thing on my arm is not cancer. I hope it's just a lump that, or, oh my God, I might die if I do that. I might, whatever. All this imagination, the materials come from the instinctive center, but it's put in the mixer of the intellectual center. And this is imagination. And so when we talk about escaping from the law of imagination, we're talking about consciousness escaping from the hold that the intellectual center usually has over it. This is very powerful to look at and think, wait a minute, what escapes and what does it mean to escape and what is it escaping from? Well, consciousness is trying to escape from the grip, the pull that the emotional and intellectual centers have over it almost all the time. What would that mean? If consciousness were free from imagination and identification, what does it do then, so to speak? And then negative emotions. The fourth way presents the idea that the material, the raw material for negative emotions, comes from the instinctive center. This is the raw material. You say something to me and it causes an instinctive vibration in me, down in my gut almost, or I can sometimes feel it in my whole body because the instinctive center occupies this whole body. Even if you say something or you push me, let's say you push me in a confrontational way, well, that's instinctive, but right away, my emotional center gets involved. I'm not taking this personally. Who the hell do you think you are? What's going on? What did I do wrong? Something emotional now is starting to happen, but the basis of it is in the instinctive. It's come from the instinctive center. And the more you learn to observe yourself, the more you'll see that almost all of your emotions have a strong instinctive component. When you really start dissecting them, there's almost always something instinctive there.
Some threat. It's a sense of a threat.
Yes, and it can be a physical, it can also be a psychological threat, but it's interpreted through the physical body. Mm-hmm. And it becomes a sensation. And then this sensation is the raw material that then, as soon as you put that into the emotional center, it combusts. And you either get depressed or you get angry or you get happy or you get sad. It's complex how these centers operate together, but this negative emotions is a law that human beings are under. And it's pervasive and it's very destructive. It's particularly destructive to awareness, to consciousness. So when we talk about escaping from the law of negative emotions, we're really talking about consciousness escaping from the hold, the grip that the instinctive center has over it. And in particular, in this manner of negative emotions. So if you understand, this isn't just a theory. I'm trying to escape from world 24 and world 48 and world 96, trying to escape from identification and imagination and negative emotions. What it really means is consciousness is literally escaping, it is transcending the emotional center, the intellectual center, and the instinctive moving center. It is rising up through those worlds, transcending itself again and again and again to the point where now it is under the laws of higher worlds. This is harder to explain what this means. And here's something interesting. You don't even need to know what that means. You don't need to know what comes next. If you can remain present, consciousness can remain present, not attached, not identified with emotions, thoughts, and sensations. That's what we're really talking about here. You can wait and see what happens. What happens then? And it's a fair question, but it doesn't need to be answered. And it can't really be answered by the mind. Do you know the mind looks out and it sees politics, it sees wars, it sees human beings interacting with one another. It even sees the ocean. I was looking at the ocean a few days ago, just sitting right at the ocean, staring at the ocean, and realizing the mind does its best to wrap its head around what this ocean is. And it can never fathom the reality of this ocean. And this ocean looks very different from the planetary world. If you could be out in space, out, say, sitting on next to Mars or Jupiter, you look back at the Earth and you see this thing called what we call the ocean. It's just a word, remember. And it's an amazing phenomenon. It's liquid. We call it water. But we put these labels on it and then we stop there. The mind just sees this superficial world all the time. What if you could start perceiving directly beyond this intellectual center and beyond even the emotional center and the instinctive center? The ocean is wet, right? And maybe it's cold and windy and they're way. No, this ocean thing, it's much more than that. And it's part of this living organism of the planet Earth. It's a big, anyway, this is what is waiting for us, you could say, is beginning to perceive from a much different vantage point than normally the way we are limited by our centers. again, looking at politics and war, we get all tangled up. Somebody's done something wrong. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong. Somebody's winning, somebody's losing. Somebody needs to be punished. Somebody needs to be blamed. Somebody needs to get the credit. This is all intellectual, emotional stuff, and it's valid in its own way. But when you escape the identification and imagination surrounding these, and then you see, interestingly enough, this is also part of this organism of Earth, and specifically this film of life on the surface of the Earth, which one of its key aspects is humanity. And all the goings on in humanity, all the psychological, emotional, instinctive goings on in humanity, seen from a distance is very, from a higher perspective, without identification and imagination and negative emotions, starts to appear, it reveals itself differently. And this is what we are capable of this. We have this potential in us of this awareness to begin to recognize itself and then begin to, by virtue of recognizing itself and detaching in a conscious way, beginning to perceive more directly things from a higher perspective. And this is not magic, it's just simple seeing more clearly, starting to see below the surface, starting to see a bigger whole, not just see little parts. And, our ordinary mind, it looks around and it sees parts. It sees this and it sees that and it sees this. And then it tries to kind of connect these parts and it sees contradictions between parts, tries to resolve these contradictions. And then if you go up and you have more control of your attention, what the fourth way calls the intellectual parts of centers, you start to see bigger pieces. And now you begin to connect parts to bigger pieces. You're more interested in how things connect to a larger whole. And you see that's not really a contradiction. That also has its place in reality, in the whole. And so now your view is different because you have control of attention. You're starting to think now, it's a thinking of a higher order, really. And then if you go beyond that with pure consciousness, sees the whole. It doesn't think the way the intellectual center thinks or the emotional center feels. It perceives more directly. And we can do this. We can start to look at things without opposition, resistance, criticism, judgment, all these negative emotions, really, which are imagination and identification. And see this world, we don't really understand how our own world of Earth operates. It's well, I'll stop there. It is a great mystery, and awareness itself can begin to probe this mystery. So anyway, this is I've said a lot, I know, but it's behind all the things I've been perceiving about this idea of laws. And again, what does it mean to escape from these laws? What are they? How do you escape from them? And what happens when you do? And I know this has prompted some thoughts in you, so I'm eager to hear how you will join in this conversation here with these points.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a whole chapter in a book, what you just said. And my mind will ping with some associations and thoughts. But there's a tendency now to hold on to them and see what, and so I can interject and so, but I just stayed with you and being present, and rather than holding on to the thoughts that I want to say in order to do a good video. Yeah. So, but let's see what comes up by itself now. Coming towards the very end, yeah, like the earth, and it's a great mystery, and awareness is even more. I mean, that which is aware of the body of the earth, it's even more mysterious, and it is so subtle that no science detected it. that which is aware. Another idea was evoked talking, from the point of view of the traditional Advaita terminology. What was evoked in me, you were mentioning that, I guess in the second state, the state of consciousness being dormant and being under the laws of caught in the intellect and caught in reactivity, caught in daydreaming, caught, in this mode of consciousness being oblivious to itself and half asleep. In that mode, we perceive, as they call it in, you said, okay, I'm looking at the ocean. Oh yeah, this is the ocean. Oh yeah, I got it. This is the oak tree. Yeah, that's a rose. Yeah, I know. This is my beloved, my wife. So we put them in a box, and it's just a name and form. And then they are, it's like it's static, and it's kind of limited. And because an oak is not an oak, the oak or my wife is like the dynamic unfolding of the universe. And from this state of being dormant, the second state of being asleep, we don't see reality as it is. We see names and forms, and then the mystery is gone. Also the ananda, the peace, and the wonderment, the amazement, the being touched by beauty tends to be gone because it's all put in boxes. So in the Advaita Vedanta, there was this idea, if I remember well, that consciousness needs to transcend nama rupa. They call it nama rupa, which means name and form. Name and form, in order to arrive at Sat Chitananda, which is the true self. Like the Sat is like that which is Sat, that which is the being. Chit is aware, is perceiving, is knowing, and Ananda is peace and bliss of being. So that's what you were describing. Instead of being caught into, that's the Atlantic Ocean and this is this, whatever, to free yourself from that and to see it fresh and innocently, divinely, perception, and then it's much more conducive for happiness, actually. It's much more conducive for fulfillment. We all of these laws that we talked about, that we are trying to free ourselves from, these are laws of suffering. It's not just theoretical, mental, nerdy. This is suffering. Being lost in daydreaming, being lost in reactive emotion, and this identification, this is suffering. So we are actually trying to come to free ourselves from unnecessary suffering, from suffering. And so by what you're describing, it's definitely connected to happiness, fulfillment, and I think that all these teachings online and all these teachings, and they talk about different terms, but ultimately it's about happiness. It's about discovering the true source of happiness and the true source of fulfillment. It's not about spiritual terminologies. We just happen to use this terminology now. I was also having a thought that you talk this identification, the fourth way, or attachment. We initially struggle with it, try to free ourselves from it by training attention and using, divided attention and all the tools that they are in the practices that ever deepen in the fourth way. But we start by consciousness being less attached to thoughts, less caught in daydreaming, less attached into emotional center or the instinctive center. That's how we start. But ultimately, this attachment of consciousness with the intellectual center, emotional center, instinctive center creates a bigger problem. It creates this sense of me as a person. So from one angle, all of this, basically imagination, identification, expression of negative emotions and inner considering, which is part of identification, being identified with how I appear, wanting to get approval, wanting to be recognized, worried, all of this. Also, it's a big law. So all of this, they create and solidify and maintain the sense of me being a person, like me, the body, me, the mind, me separate. And now I'm another object in this world of objects. So I believe, I sense that by doing this preliminary work of not getting identified, being less identified with thoughts, feelings, sensations, opinions, attitudes, it's almost like makes the cloudy atmosphere less cloudy, so it starts to be more of a sky. And then, with the right pointers, we can have a glimpse, like consciousness has a glimpse of itself, like, oh, wow, these thoughts come and go, and there's the experiential taste of the presence tasting itself, and then that's a glimpse of our true nature. In modern day traditions, that sometimes that's considered to be the ultimate, that's to be the end of the goal, just had a glimpse of our true nature. But in our understanding and even solid, more thorough Advaita Vedanta as well as fourth way, that is not the end of the goal. That is just the true beginning of the path. That's now we are going somewhere. Before there was like a preparation, that we're on the path to the path. So once we have that experiential taste, presence as a taste of itself, now self-remembering, it's self-remembering now means much more. So true self-remembering is now coming back to that, coming back to knowingly being the being. And then I guess later, this will be more like in a deeper advanced states, this having more frequency, more duration, more depth, more depth and more death of the false self, then there's like self-remembering is mixed with God remembering. Remember there was this Sufi master that we used to study when we were in that school, Gurdjieff from the Naqshbandi order. He would say what Gurdjieff would say. Gurdjieff would say, remember yourself with every breath, or you remember yourself always and everywhere. And this Sufi master would say, remember God always and everywhere. So at some point, I guess, Atman realizes it is Brahman. The presence realizes it's the all. All right, Peter, so I went brush strokes here like a lot. So here's what I got for you.
Well, something you just said a moment ago made me think this idea about the end of the goal and such, that it seems to me what happens is initially the mind and person are on the path, and they are really looking for this, whether they know it or not, they're looking for this glimpse, or they're looking for the place, the opportunity when this glimpse can occur. And then when it does, now the mind has reached the end of its path, its goal. And now awareness is on the path, which is a different path. It's in a higher dimension, the dimension of itself. And now there is distance for it to travel. Just as the mind you had to learn, you had to study, you had to practice, you had to do all these things, and then you arrive at this glimpse. And now this glimpse means that in right order, if the preparation was correct or healthy and all this, and circumstances were good, now in right order, this glimpse is awareness realizing itself. It's not the mind trying to get to awareness or prompt awareness. Now, and so you did travel a distance, you could say, to get to that point. And now awareness can go farther, deeper, higher, because you said we're more constricted when we're in these lower, when we're in imagination, identification, this feeling of identity. These lower laws represent constriction of awareness. Awareness in form. You're talking about name and form. And awareness gets constricted, it gets narrowed, it gets tightened, it gets dense, more dense. And so this freedom, this liberation, and it's often used that word, liberation. What does this mean? It means awareness is now liberated from these laws, these things that pull it down. And this is where the happiness comes from. Happiness doesn't refer to me. It doesn't mean I'm now going to be happy with my life. It means awareness is free. And by virtue of that, and it's lighter, it's now it's less constricted. It's under less laws. It's no longer tied to these lower worlds, as the fourth way says, these lower dimensions. It's higher now and it's freer, lighter. And this is really what this happiness is, in my experience. It's not that Peter is a happier person. Granted, a lot of shackles fall off for Peter when realization happens. Yes, because it becomes clear that worrying about things doesn't get you anywhere. It becomes clear that reliving the past, just digging that trench again and unburying things and all this. I mean, it can, I know that's your field too with your therapy, and that has a value. I'm not meaning that so much, but just in normal situations where we're reliving situations in the past, you realize that's moot. It doesn't mean anything, and you're you're wasting your time carrying that baggage with you. So yes, you become lighter, you become happier, quote unquote. But true happiness, peace, bliss, all these things, these really are referring, they're attempts to describe the nature of awareness when it's free, when
Yeah.
it's more liberated from these laws. But what happens is our mind and our emotions and even our instinctive, our sensory body tries to sort of put on this cloak of happiness. The instinctive center, the emotional center, and the intellectual center each have their own sort of version of what happiness would be. And they try to put on that cloak in the name of spiritual. It's like a spiritual cloak they each concoct. And then they try to put that on and feel, I'm happy, I'm in bliss, I'm peaceful, but it's sort of like doing their best to imitate
Mhm.
in their worlds what really is referring to as consciousness in its own higher dimension. And this has to do too with the attachment. This because you said, how do we work on the identification? Well, we do start with trying to work on what we are identified with. I'm identified with this person. I'm identified with my looks. I'm identified with my health. I'm identified with my money. I'm identified with my reputation, and so on. We try to then sort of figure out mentally, how can I be less attached? How can I be less identified? But it's all about the thing we're identified with.
And it's about the me, like
And it's about
me
the
as a
me.
person trying to be
Yes,
less identified with this problem. And then
precisely.
we have to do it like this for some time.
Yes, until we realize that the real problem is awareness itself is attached. And then so how does this awareness free itself? And you can almost leave these subjects I mentioned just a moment ago, the person, the money, the health, the reputation, instead of spending all your time trying to untie each of those knots, you realize that you can just it happens at the source.
Yeah,
That's where the release happens.
yeah,
The non-identification really happens. And then when you release at the source, those knots will untie themselves. They'll either dissolve or slowly dissipate, or they'll gradually untie themselves. There's nothing to hold them together anymore if awareness is not identified with them, not attached to them. They may stay because they've taken a form. They have kind of crystallized in a form, petrified in a form, But left alone, they will, just like something in the ocean, it'll get washed away gradually. It'll wear down slowly. Nothing lasts forever
Yeah.
except consciousness, it seems, which is not in time. Everything is in it. So anyway, that's another topic. But so these things will resolve, but you realize it's at the real problem is at the source. It's not what we're identified with. It's not what we're in imagination about. It's not the thing that seems to be making us negative. It's all back in this source of awareness itself, which brings you back to the Advaita and Vedanta teachings about awareness cognizing itself. As one of my new dear friends, Tulku Ugyen Rinpoche, I believe that's how you pronounce it, talks about awareness as simply, he's saying it's not empty. He's trying to describe it, the indescribable, but he's basically saying the way he was taught through his tradition is that awareness, this thing we call awareness, it is an emptiness. It's not empty. It is an emptiness. And you can't see it or feel it or touch it or smell it or hear it. It's this complete, absolute emptiness. It's in everyone. And it has the capacity to cognize itself. This is self-realization. When this emptiness, this awareness cognizes itself. And this is self-remembering in the fourth way. Same thing. And then not only can it cognize itself, it is, as he said, infused with awareness. This is its nature. This emptiness is actually has this capacity to cognize itself and be infused with awareness. And he says that even though it's in everyone, of course, the difference is that, as he said, between a sentient being and Buddha or a Buddha, which is just a representation of absolute awareness. He's not intending a person so much, but he said the difference between a sentient being and a Buddha is that this emptiness is not cognizing itself. It's not aware as itself. And it's from there that it can begin to mature, you could say, become more stable. He's saying it's not stable. And the fourth way teaches exactly the same thing. You try to remember yourself, you try to be present, not in imagination, not in identification, not engulfed in negative emotions. But why? But then you fall back into them. Why not? This awareness, this consciousness, it's not stable. And all the idea of all the practices, really, when you break them down, in all the traditions, they are connected to awareness, learning, you could say, to become more and more stable, to stabilize its own awareness, its own consciousness. This is the common thread of all the teachings throughout all history. And everything else if you can keep this in mind, you can connect everything else to this at all times. It all comes back to awareness stabilizing and then becoming sturdier and becoming more solid in terms of its recognition of itself.
You know, I'm aware that this talk now, it's a broad, zoomed out map, and it's intellectual and philosophical, and I'm also a very practical guy. So if new people come to this and they listen for 35 minutes, it's amazing.
It is amazing if they will listen.
Yes,
But they will certainly gain a lot if they do.
But the way to go, okay, that's a broad, zoomed out map. If this is appealing to your spiritual heart and mind, you can go to the beginning of playlist when we get very nitty-gritty, practical, what to start with, what to struggle with. We are more like going closer to the ground and outlining the next steps to walk the path. Yeah. So I'm just sharing this. And on another line of thought, yeah, I want to touch more on this because for you, I believe, and for us in the fourth way, for me too, I believe, there was this preliminary work, purifying work, where the self, the consciousness didn't know itself for a long time. But we formed this work personality and this inner practitioner that has different names in the fourth way, goes through various stages of getting stronger. And then there starts to be knowing the Mihai Algiu with the different personalities, the different roles, the different most mechanical tendencies, struggling with these sleep tendencies. So this was for you and for me. We did this for like years and years and years without knowing what we are. But there was the purifying effect. And then at some point there's this glimpse, yeah, that we talk about, and where actually Francis talks about it. At that moment, the path of the individual ends. You are on the path of being an individual trying to attain something. Now starts the path of Shiva, the path of, hey, now the path is that I'm still walking the path as consciousness, not as an individual. So now that's from an angle what they call these days awakening. I had an awakening, and I used to work with people in a more like spiritual community as helping them process trauma. 1 in 3 people who come to me, they said that they had an awakening. And I was like, okay, very nice. What do you mean by that? And what is still here? So in the fourth way, it's a very, I think to land there, that just having a glimpse of our true nature and to say, well, I was already that. It's my birthright. That's it. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. That is a big, that's sad to stop there. It's a bummer. It's a misunderstanding. And it's the utility of some kind of avoiding work and laziness. Or just innocent ignorance. I'm sorry. Now, even in solid, direct path, Advaita Vedanta, they say, Francis, Rupert, John Klein, at that moment of glimpse, the so-called awakening, that's more like 30% of the path. And then one still has these residuals of ignorance. One still has the patterns, the gravity of the unconsciousness pulling us down. One may still have some deep down, unresolved trauma that keeps coming up with some weird thoughts snagging at us. So they say that now there's a post-awakening sadhana. It's not that that's the end. No, it's still sadhana, the practice. It's post-glimpse sadhana to keep cleaning this. They are seen by awareness and they're diminishing just by being seen. And, in my profession, sometimes some of them are really stuck and deeply down, so they may need a little washing machine cycle, so they loosen up. Yeah, but so that's the post-awakening sadhana. The effect of it is to keep cleansing the body-mind from the residual of believing to be a person and to free oneself from laws. And then the end of the goal, which is very noble and far, is liberation. Yeah, so awakening is not liberation. And all the goodies are more like on the liberation side. And, in the fourth way, they have this, they don't throw awakening right away like this. There are stages. There's man number 4. To become a man number 4, it's already a great way above the overall level of humanity. And then man number 5, number 6, number 7. So this mature, realistic progression of this is like from a seed, from an acorn to an oak tree. And also this has an energetic, alchemical component in the fourth way. I believe in the yogic, non-dual tradition too. There's all kind of things need to happen at the subtler body.
I was going to say too that this thing about in the fourth way, man number 4, this interim sort of, you don't just go right to this big glimpse and then awakening. But it's because the reason it's valuable is because you go from a condition where attention basically is uncontrolled. It's just wandering. You're just in imagination, identification, negative emotions. You're living your life, but your attention is not in control of itself. It's being drawn to things. You focus when you need to, when there's an impetus to do so, and then you lapse, and this whole business in the fourth way, this preparation, this purification. One way to understand it is the harnessing, the gradual harnessing of attention. Attention is now gaining control of itself. And then from there, it is handing itself over to its source. It is transmuting as awareness, as pure consciousness. And this is when you get into these higher levels in the fourth way. But to jump from no attention to realization and not understand what's going on with your attention is where a lot of things can go wrong, it seems to me. And if you have, I mentioned earlier, there can still be remnants of things. And they're petrified in you. And so they don't necessarily disappear right away. And what can happen in the fourth way, what happens, it seems to me, is in right order again, you are chipping away at these gradually by changing your thinking, learning not to express negative emotions, changing why you tend to think through the lens of negativity all the time, trying to see the subjects with which you are identified and in imagination about, they have a grip on you. And you gradually gain control of attention in those areas so that they have less of a grip. And what you're doing is this, by working with attention in this way, you are clearing up this interior space in your being for awareness, to simply be there and reside there and know itself as awareness without constantly collapsing into all of these forms, psychological forms in you. And so this is about attention. And interestingly enough, Mihai, if you look at most practices in most spiritual traditions, they're all about attention. Using attention, focusing attention, concentrating attention, mastering your attention in the different centers. And in the fourth way, this is done, the principle is you're working on all of them at the same time, in parallel at different times: intellectual center, emotional center, instinctive center, moving center. You're developing this gradual balance of controlled attention, not for the sake of control. It doesn't mean that. It means attention now has control of itself and is not being just pulled away and drawn into things all the time, distracted, obscuring awareness itself. This is a form of purification in the fourth way, a form of preparation, and it can be a form of cleansing. That's what purification is. And especially, it seems to me, in the area of negative emotions, there are so many ways our sense of identity is wrapped up in our negativity. And it's not easy to see that and to see what that means. And in the fourth way, this practice of not expressing negative emotions gradually dislodges that feeling of I, so that you can then see that and see that that is not what is looking at it. And see, that's not, as Spensky said, you're not who you imagine yourself to be. We've been imagining ourselves as that I, that feeling of I. And that feeling of I has itself been lodged in all this imagination, identification, negativity. And this takes time to unravel, to sort out, to see through, and to dissolve, to dissipate. I just want to say one more thing. You mentioned about being practical. I know that I have a strong intellectual component, and I look at all these things, and people sometimes say to me, "Oh, Peter, that's so theoretical." And for me, of course, for me, it's not in the way, because of the understanding behind it. It's the way it gets expressed may seem and can be theoretically expressed as theory. But I anticipated that you were going to say this, Mihai, before we had this talk. I said, I know that Mihai is going to say at some point, we need to make this practical, Peter. And so I thought to myself, you want to make this practical? Everything we've been talking about, these laws, imagination, identification, negative emotion, so on, It really can be as simple as when you're pouring your coffee in the morning. When you stand at the kitchen, and I presume you're pouring, maybe not, you're just putting your cup in a machine and it's pouring for you. But let's assume you're pouring your coffee or you're washing your dishes. Something this small. Ask yourself, what's happening right now with my mind, my emotions, and my sensations? Is my awareness lost in them? Am I daydreaming about what I'm going to do after my coffee? Am I in imagination about the new coffee cup I saw at the store yesterday? I wish I had bought. Am I identified with my task, the task that's waiting after I pour the coffee? Am I irritated with my day, with my mate, with a coworker, with a situation of pressure that I don't want to face? Am I feeling negative? It's this is it. And this is the beauty of the fourth way. It takes place in these conditions. You're just in your ordinary life, putting on your socks, pouring your coffee, walking to the car, sharpening a pencil, trying to get your computer to start when it won't. You're doing all these little things. This is it. These are the moments when all of this comes to task, and you can see to what extent are you under these laws? To what extent is your awareness not cognizant of itself? As opposed to, for example, just being there pouring what, and you're not even there. See, if you're really more present, you're not even there pouring the coffee. You're there watching Peter pour the coffee into the cup. And you see that even a cup is a little miracle. This thing called a cup. Think about that. Humankind has developed a way to contain liquid so that it can then pour it into its body. And a cup is also it's much more than a cup. Yes, and your socks are much more than just socks. This is where it's very
Yeah,
practical. Being present is the most practical thing you can do in your life.
yeah.
Not be attached.
I know that when I say these objections, like, "Hey, Peter, that's a little theoretical," I'm talking for our viewers, and I don't know where they are coming from, but I do know, and also I have Mihai Algiu has this strong intellectual thing and likes all these maps, and yeah, and I know that you and me, I know what's behind it. You've been practicing for years and years in a very Zen, every moment kind of practical, experiential way, and now we are talking about it to inspire, to guide. But I was, when I say that, because some of the viewers, they haven't done all of that thing, and they may think that just thinking along these lines is going to do it. Thinking along these lines systematically is going to help
Mhm.
to get closer to the work, but it's not enough. And actually, even it's even before the time to pour the coffee. If one is getting serious about this, I'm sure it is like this for you. I mean, I woke up, I don't know, 6 a.m. I went I want to go to the bathroom. So okay, I woke up, the instincts and I'm sleepy, but I don't know, as I stood up, there was some kind of quick, how can I put it, some remembrance, like, of presence. So it needs to start way before we pour the coffee.
Yes, it has to stabilize itself before we engage in any activity. What often happens when we learn about these things in the beginning is we start going about all of our activities, and then at some point we remember, and presence tries to stabilize itself. And what we're working toward, and of course what is practical is how can this awareness in us be maintain stability and be there as soon as you get up out of the bed. In fact, as soon as you open your eyes and you're starting to get up out of bed, awareness is already stable or stabilizing. What does that mean?
Well, yeah, so here's very practical exercise for any mature practitioner to first of all, when you go to sleep, turn off the light. I'm not talking about sitting meditation in bed, that's cool, that's very good. But you lie down, turn off the light to somehow be present to the totality of our experience rather than be absent and lost in dreams and stuff. Being present, the body being present, and just relaxing and being, fall asleep in this way. Then there'll be more chances in the morning, as the state changes from the night sleep to first, I guess, it's fragmented a little bit. It's fragmented. It's first to remember in a way to put them together. It's almost like awareness now. Okay, inspecting checking system. Okay, this body's here. Maybe something in the belly. Then the light. I see the light. Sounds. We don't need to go into planning yet. Let's just marinate here in this emptiness. One teachers I called it emptyfulness, because it's empty, but it's full of itself and it bubbles everything. So it's emptyfulness, So stay with that, and then, maybe even take the cover consciously and then put the feet down consciously. I hear it may help to boost the emotion center, a little bit of thank you. It's another day. I mean, it's another day. I'm alive. It's opportunity to grow. Thank you. A little gratitude. Having some aims. Okay, what will be some practical aim for me today? Having a little book next to the bed shelf and reading there a little bit. Then having a coffee. Then maybe having a little qigong or yoga. Well, not just mechanical qigong or yoga, but qigong or yoga with awareness, with presence, and then a little meditation or breath work or a walk. Start the day like that. That is great. As opposed to getting on the phone, doom scrolling, various things, Facebook, infusion of all that. That's practical.
Yes, to not be pulled down so quickly into these lower worlds and laws. They're waiting for us. It's designed that way. For some reason, this whole cosmic design is designed, on the one hand, to pull awareness down into these lower forms. It's sort of the lifeblood of the whole creation, this awareness. But it's also designed to enable it to realize itself and to circulate itself up to higher, less dense, finer vibration of worlds and perception.
And thus if we live unconsciously, we have a life of some joy, some mediocre, some torture, some disillusionment, some fun stuff. And then we mechanically fulfill the purposes of nature, perhaps. And yeah, as a human being, as a species, there are all kind of function of human beings, of a humanity on this earth. But by waking up more and more and freeing oneself from these laws, we fulfill the function of nature, but also we are making a spiritual profit for our soul. And in the fourth way, that's very meaningful and serious idea that we are developing the astral body, or the body keshjan, that is able to remain conscious at death and not be pulled in every direction. But how can we do that if all day, every day, we are at the law of accident, pulled in every direction? I get an email that I need to pay something. It's like, oh, I'm flustered. And then I go out in town, I have a little cookie, and it's like, oh, that's nice. And then this cute lady looks at me, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's a good day. And then I see somebody who tells me something. So this is my day is a yo-yo. It's like, that's the law of the yo-yo, the law of accident, basically totally stimulus response. our atmosphere is completely affected by all the stimulus all the time. You know, that's misery. Peter, I am under the law of needing to work and make some money, so I will need to go.
Thank you, Mihai.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll transcend this law soon. And if you have any comments or topics of interest, feel free to reach out here. We'll get back to you. And thank you. Bye.